Hey guys, how are you all doing today? I am so stoked that you guys all came out. It has been an awesome hack fort. I can't believe how busy it was out there when I just peaked. But thank you guys so much for coming out to Tree Fort and Hack Fort. I hope you guys are really having a great time. I think it's Snow Fort this year, maybe. I don't know. I am just so touched and honored to have my next guest out here tonight. Robin and his business partner, Cory Davis, have been so generous with their time, and they have a new game company that they are working on and a new game. One thing I want to say, the last time Robin came to Hackfort, I always tell my friends it was the time that Robin took us to church because he really blew our minds, and it was really fun, and I'm just so touched to have him back out, and it was really cool to meet Cory the last few months. But I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Enough about me. Here we go, guys.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you all at Hackfort. We're thrilled to be here. And welcome all to this afternoon's presentation, Horror Will Have You Now. And in the next hour or so, Cory and I will be stepping through the makings of horror as we understand them to be, what horror does and why it works. And we'll be discussing some, but not all, of the subgenres of horror, and talk through some of our favorite examples of horror in film, TV, literature, games. But first, about us.
Yeah, real quick, I'm Cory Davis. I'm a game developer, probably first and foremost. If you think about me, that's the thing that I'm living the most in my life every single day. But started out getting into games because of the kind of immense power that I found there for storytelling, and the kind of ability to immerse people into stories, into new worlds that they never could have entered in their physical life, places where kind of allowed my imagination to soar. But I had a chance to start working on some of those game projects with my friends when I was really young, and so started out in the modding scene. Worked on some Half-Life mods that we had some success with, but at the time I definitely was always focused on horror. It was something that we'll talk a little bit about it later, but something that I feel like, I was almost born with this kind of proclivity to delve into the darker side of storytelling. And games are just such a powerful opportunity for that. But I had the opportunity to work on and be a designer on games like Fear and games in the Condemned franchise at Monolith when I was there. From there, I had the opportunity to move to Berlin for 5 years, where I was the lead designer and creative director of Spec Ops: The Line, which is a dark kind of a drive and journey into the human psyche that we'll talk a little more about. But at a certain point, I had this feeling that I needed to come back to LA, that there was an opportunity there to really push the boundaries of what was happening in kind of the art scene of game development, and the types of stories and gameplay that they were telling. So I moved back and started a studio there in 2011 called Tangent Games, where I directed a game called Here They Lie. And I actually had the awesome chance to do like a retrospective here. I think it was at the first Hack Fort back in 2016. And that was an awesome experience. But we'll talk a little bit more about that game as well, and why it kind of fits into this kind of overarching theme, and why I pursued it. But as we were finishing up that game in 2016, we had our studio housed within the Sony Santa Monica studio there in LA, and I had everything kind of out on the cutting room floor. I was also a musician for that project, and Robin walked into the building, and we connected on a level that was a lot different to me than the connections that I had made with other people in the game industry specifically, and brought a whole new perspective to what I was doing, and couldn't essentially put that conversation down. And so it started with music, but I'll let Robin tell you a little bit more about where it led to.
Yes. Hello, I'm Robin, and I'm the guitar player in Nine Inch Nails for a couple of decades. And in 2015 or 16, I was ushered to the game development community by way of my friend Mike Wilson, who is co-founder of Devolver Digital and now Deep Well. And I started in sound, really music at first, and then kind of moved through the audio space quickly. And one foot in front of the other really led me to that day that Cory speaks about, where I was invited to play test the Here They Lie experience as they were kind of wrapping that up. And I was so excited to do so, and even more so to meet Cory, as he suggests. We really touched antennas on all the important stuff, and surprisingly stayed in touch rather immediately. And moved through some musical projects together, which led to us really kind of jamming about story, the immersion of a playable experience. We were working in that musical capacity, but that moved through towards whiteboarding, just ideas for story, characters, and the development of the relationship of characters within environments that we were photobashing in Photoshop together. And really this world started to emerge, this universe that we're still continuing to dive deeper into now with the greater team at Eyes Out. And yeah.
Yeah, at that moment, this world started to blossom in front of us. It was almost like we had let the cat out of the bag and there was no putting it back in. It was something that just kept growing, and it was a really amazing opportunity for me to start those conversations with music and have that drive towards the imagination of this place that we would one day inhabit as in a game, first and foremost. And we started to realize that we needed to build that team that Robin had mentioned. And this was right around the time when things really kind of shut down due to the pandemic. And so it was an interesting moment to be sitting there thinking, let's grow a group of creators together to build this very specific thing that we're just dying to see come to life. And so we were able to put together a prototype, and that was an awesome experience. We got some friends together to help us with that, and then we were able to pitch to get an epic mega grant. And so that was an awesome moment for our team, because we were able to then bring on a bunch of the creators that we really felt could add so much to the vision that we had just kind of planted the seed of. And so that was a great experience, and it gave us, because of the fact that it was during this kind of tumultuous time, we didn't just recruit from the group that we already knew or the people that lived in our neighborhood. We really looked out across the possibilities. We were able to, like the experience I had with first starting to meet and work with Robin, I feel like we've been able to pull in a group that has such a vast range of experience and perspective from both within the game industry and their own lives as well. And so we have members of our team in LA, but we also are spread across the world. and we've built this, I would say, this really strong camaraderie amongst our group. And so we really have a lot of fun kind of with this established like seed that I had mentioned that has been planted, watching it grow and letting it blossom in the way that it naturally comes from this group of creators that we've been so fortunate to get together here. Yeah.
And we're at Alpha.
Yeah. We've now passed through the prototype phase for our game development, and we've moved deep into development. We've actually passed the alpha milestone, which is where the whole full thing is playable for the first time. And so we're just so excited to be able to announce that soon. We can't wait to show you what we're working on, but we're working up to that moment, which is going to be huge for our studio at Eyes Out, where we get to finally announce to the world exactly what we're doing.
And so let's move into it. As I had mentioned, we will journey through the makings of horror as we assume them to be for us, and what horror does and why horror works. And if we were to get right to it, but the thing is, horror shocks. Horror shocks visually and shocks orally and shocks emotionally.
Yeah, and it's, I would say the very best creators of horror, they utilize this element of shock value in a really creative way. They don't just hit you in the face with it over and over, and they constantly have you on the kind of edge of your seat, the tip of your toes, ready to jump. I would say that the very best horror oftentimes doesn't shock you when you think that it will. It shocks you when you are least prepared. And that kind of game that's being played with whoever's created this story, and your opportunity to participate in it, is extremely visceral. It's something that I think even in our daily lives, outside of experiencing a horror film or game or anything like that, it's something that we're all kind of tuned into and on the lookout for, things that might shock or terrify us in the blink of an eye, and they can often be entirely unexpected.
Mm-hmm. And horror provokes. It often urges us to think beyond our ordinary perception and experience. In that way, it really is more often an exploration of the unknown, and this is the hook that really lures us.
Definitely.
And it does this by way of exploring mystical beliefs, the practice of magic, ritual of the occult, science and science fiction, paranormal phenomena, supernatural ability, monsters, madness, demons, otherworldly realms, dreams, the afterlife.
And I would say that the reason why this is so effective is because these are universal kind of themes that each of us at times contemplate. The questions about existence, the questions about the way that certain people behave, or the decisions that they make in their lives, and the horror that comes from realizing that you might be just like them, or that something like that could happen to you. I think the mind runs wild with kind of an ancient kind of provocation that pushes us towards conversations that involve like Robin was saying, things that all of us probably experience at some point or another, or think about whether or not there's something behind that wall, or whether or not there's ghosts, or whether or not this reality is the full vision of what's actually happening around us.
And horror is often heavily steeped in atmosphere, which runs the dynamic arc of from foreboding, sort of dense compression, to an animated and astonishing release.
Yeah, and that probably this is the thing that attracts me to horror more than anything. I wouldn't be surprised if Robin said something similar, but oftentimes horror movies are the most atmospheric. They push the boundaries of immersion in ways that that other films maybe step back from a little bit, as they're trying to portray more like your reality. But also horror films allow us to step away from our reality into another zone of imagination. And that oftentimes comes from the things that aren't even shown on screen, or are very kind of vaguely described in literature, or just let our minds run wild because of this ability that horror has to invite us to leave the world behind and to actually immerse ourselves into the shoes of the characters in these stories that we love, and that are so powerful because of that.
Mm-hmm. And one tool employed, of course, is color. And color can be used to manipulate the emotion of an audience, really in all genres, but especially in horror. Color can trigger primal feelings in an intuitive way.
And I would say, like, one of our favorite examples of the usage of color as an effective element of horror and immersion is the 1977 film from Dario Argento, Suspiria. And I know a lot of you have probably seen it, but it's every time that I go back to it, I even went back to it this week, it is shocking in so many ways. And it instantly takes you out of the real world and into a terrifying kind of chamber of terror that you're not expecting. And it's extreme. It's theatrical. It's over the top. One of and all of these shots obviously are very kind of heavy with their usage of color, and it's very intentional. It's not something that was done just by using standard camera equipment and then editing it in a certain way later. It was something that was done by using very specific film-driven cameras that separate the color spectrum.
Technicolor, three strip camera.
And so literally you're getting the purity of a very small portion of the color spectrum that's hitting you and being used for effect in each of the scenes throughout that film. And I think that is, I think that's a lesson in extremes for all filmmakers, for all visual medium storytellers, and how effective that can be, even if you don't have a huge budget or something like that. The usage of color to affect kind of a primal feeling that I think each of us has, as well as just to take us out of this kind of real world into an otherworldly space.
Mm-hmm. And Dario Argento, the director of Suspiria, had this to say. He says, "A horror film brings to the surface some of the ancestral fears we hide deep inside us. And Suspiria would not have had the same cathartic function if I had used the fullness and consolatory sweetness of the full color spectrum to immediately make Suspiria a total abstraction of what we call everyday reality. I use the usually reassuring primary colors only in their purest essence, making them immediately and surprisingly violent and provocative. This brings the audience into the world of Suspiria." Hey, that's what you just said.
I think I plagiarized a little bit. but I agree.
Moving through color, in the interest of time, I think we'll visit one color. Can anybody guess what color that might be? What? And if we were to, hang with red in one film, we naturally started discussing The Shining and the use of red in The Shining.
Yeah, it's such an interesting journey, that entire film. If you think about where you start, kind of far away from the Overlook Hotel, you start in a place that feels quite safe, but at the same time, there's already some foreshadowing going on with the usage of the color red between Wendy and Danny, even at the very beginning of the film. But the film progresses from what I would say feels almost like an everyday life type of scenario, and goes down the rabbit hole towards the Overlook Hotel, which I would say is the heart of this kind of shocking, terror-ridden color red. And as we get closer and closer to the center of that, and kind of the experience that we have, even seeing the blood rush up out of the elevator there, we go further and further into almost drowning in this color within the Overlook Hotel itself. And the characters themselves, a lot of them, especially Jack here, start out, very kind of friendly, and even the color expression surrounding them evolves to this really dark blood red that's absolutely terrifying by the time it peaks towards the end of the film. Mm-hmm. And there's other usages of color in this film that are really interesting too, to contrast the usage of red. For example, we see red here leading on this kind of iconic patterned carpet here, but in contrast to that, we have colors like blue and green that are used to kind of lure us deeper into that space. And even the character Dick Halloran, who's kind of the savior character here, is dressed or lays on green sheets. And there's times where the movie dips into red and then back out to give us kind of a repose from that.
Yeah. Here we're looking at when little Danny sort of leaves this foreboding soul of the Overlook Hotel and enters the other realm of room 237 and leaves all red behind. And this is a scene that's all excessive mint green, and we really get a feeling that something's off. There's a break from the normal. We're dealing with psychological turmoil, even hallucination, and it's an effective kind of departure from the symbolic kind of color realm that we'd been treated to thus far. I think this is Dick Halloran. Yeah, he's one of the savior character. He's dressed in blue. He's not. We don't see him in red. Moving to the gold room, which is in this scene, Jack has been drinking and is starting to settle into the idea that we as the audience are settling into the idea that he's losing his mind. He's losing, and even the Overlook Hotel is maybe he's sitting in some separation between the grip or the grasp that the hotel had on him here, 2-4. He's seeing ghosts, and also this gold room sets up the following scene, which is Yes, which is overtly red, and is it's really the ultimate devolution of his character, where Jack is speaking with an apparition of Grady, who convinces him to murder his family.
Yeah, I really love the way that this intentional kind of usage of color takes us into this this place where we know we're going to be terrified eventually, but lures us in slowly, and then brings Jack into that gold room, like Robin was mentioning, where his whole guard is kind of let down before he reveals his true nature in the red bathroom, where he actually contemplates the terror that he will cause on others later in the film. This film is also a great example of the usage of sound for effect throughout I would say the score is really important in The Shining, the way that it builds, the way that it also acts as a kind of subconscious underscore that at times you don't even notice, but really comes for your heartstrings at times. Sound is what I would say the most powerful kind of immersive tool that we have as horror creators. It's the thing that me personally, sounds that I hear that I can't figure out or that I think are something else, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. The sounds that are just around the corner, sounds that immerse me into a space that make me believe that I'm actually there. And like I was saying before, invite me to leave my reality behind and step into a place where I'm no longer playing the game of being afraid, but I'm actually being terrified, because these things are things that go beyond what can be expressed visually. They're things that my imagination may be interpreting entirely differently than what was intended. But like a lot of these elements, there's something primal there about certain types of sounds and sounds that are outside of our view, and things that we can't quite identify, things that could be from outside of the physical world, that could be from areas that we don't really have a grasp on, and it can be terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And sound is also pivotal in the creation of fear and dread, and also silence is pivotal in the buildup of fear and dread, and that chasm or that void between two soundscapes is wholly effective and unbearable sometimes, and sometimes it's that's what horror aims at, is the unbearable, because the other side of unbearable is where that release is amplified tenfold. And sound, I think you touched upon, persuades our imagination to kind of put the puzzle pieces together that we're not seeing or otherwise witnessing, or even or is otherwise inferred apart from through sound. It's really a skeleton key to a universal, instinctual, primal understanding of what could be. Did you want to speak of synesthesia and games and immersive?
One thing that that I would say we're constantly pursuing, and one of the reasons why, like, we're creating a world right now, and the first instantiation of it will be in a game, is because of the fact that in games you actually get to take a step further into inhabiting the characters that are there. We have the ability to experience not just a visual or even a audible experience, but the entire combination of what is human physical experience plus our own imaginations. And we're in control in those moments. And that's what I think can make games so powerful when it comes to horror, is because there's a synesthesia between what you're doing and what you're hearing and what you're feeling, and your imagination can run wild, and it's just one step further into immersing yourself into a place that is beyond your physical reality.
Mm-hmm. And this synesthesia can really stir and cause panic and confusion. I'm going to try to walk us through an auditory example of a scene from the film Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Good luck, y'all. Character Pam is approaching a house, an unknown house that she discovers following her friends through a field. And she enters the house expecting to find her friends. And she walks into a room, and the room is full of totems, chicken bones and human bones and other animal bones tied and manipulated together, and they're hanging from the ceiling, and they're in the furniture, and the room is full of it. And we're seeing flashes of these totem, these bone sculptures, and she's visibly disturbed and befuddled and confused. But the real kind of menacing horror of it is the fact that we're hearing this clucking of a chicken, which is otherwise an ordinary sound, but juxtaposed against the flash frames of these wired bones together, and there's chicken feathers all over the floor, and the chicken feathers are rising, and we're hearing this distressed cluck of this chicken, but we don't see the chicken, but we hear the chicken, and it's just really just a menacing sound to behold. And it's just an example that I'm offering of an ordinary sound juxtaposed against an extraordinary kind of visual scape or narrative concept, and how that can confuse and disorient. And that scene very effectively sets up the next scene when she walks into, I believe it's a kitchen area, and we start to hear the squealing of pigs, and the squealing of pigs is growing louder and louder, and Leatherface just busts out from this metal door and without any hesitation bangs her on the top of the head with a hammer. And without warning and without any pig in sight, I'm got the feeling of maybe how Leatherface how he feels about these intruders in his home. It feels more of an abattoir or a slaughter, and really less human. But again, point is through the use of ordinary sounds in an extraordinary conceptual experience.
Yeah, it's such a powerful scene. If you haven't had a chance to check that one out, definitely worth digging back into the archives for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. That scene that Robin just mentioned there, which mostly takes place within your own mind, because very little is shown on the screen, it actually reminds me of traumatic experiences and how we perceive them in our real life. And it was done by actually removing a lot of the elements that could have been shown, and allowing us to imagine that we were there ourselves. And it's such a powerful moment there without really showing much of Leatherface at all. But you feel his disdain for not only his victims, but for what seems to be all of humanity.
Yeah.
And you may feel empathy for these farm animals that are there as you realize that you're just like them in his eyes. Mm-hmm. And so that's such a powerful moment there, and it really sets up a buildup of dread throughout that film. But it's a simple story, right? A lot of these stories that are in horror, whether it be films or games or literature, they are universal stories. They're a lot of times they're ones where someone dies. That's something that I would say that most of us worry about or think about at some point in our lives, If not, I would invite you to think about it at some point. But it also it often includes a really dynamic character or like a surprising turn of events that you never could have imagined. The protagonist is often seeking out answers, maybe answers to something that they can't find amongst their peer group, they can't find amongst the scientific community, something beyond, something exciting. And the antagonist is a constant redefinition of our darkest fears, the deepest, darkest evil, the beings that are even maybe further than what we could possibly imagine at this moment. That's what horror aims to present to us on a plate. Mm-hmm. And there's obviously, we wouldn't have horror films if we didn't have horror literature to begin with. And even before that, just stories passed on through word of mouth and through artwork and symbology. But one of the authors that I would say, even though there's things about this author that I disdain, H.P. Lovecraft constantly kind of tiptoes around the boundaries that even other horror writers have put in place for physical reality, and causes me to question what lies out beyond what we believe is the edge of existence, what is non-existence, and how does the void stare back at us? But yeah.
An excerpt from Lovecraft at the Mountains of Madness in 1931. It reads, "It is absolutely necessary for the peace and safety of mankind that some of Earth's dark, dead corners and unplumbed depths be left alone, lest sleeping abnormalities wake to resurgent life, and blasphemously surviving nightmares squirm and splash out of their black lairs to newer and wider conquests."
And so, once again, speaking of like things that you couldn't possibly show in a visual way, but extremely powerful without sound or visuals, to trigger an imagination of this darkness that's there.
Yes, and from the novel, The Exorcist, written by William Blatty in 1971, who also wrote the screenplay for the 1973 film. "But I'll tell you something, Father. You give me Reagan's identical twin, same face, same voice, same smell, same everything, down to the way she dots her eyes, and still I'd know in a second that it wasn't really her. I'd know it. I know it in my gut, and I'm telling you, I know that thing upstairs is not my daughter. I know it. I know."
And I love this because I think each of us at times has a preconception that we know something that is unknowable. And here, can you imagine being in that situation where someone who was that close to you, you had a sensation when you looked at them and when you were near them that they were not themselves? This, to me, questions, what is it to be human? Do we know who other people are? Do we know who we are? And what happens if that changes? And so there's a terror there that goes beyond kind of the trappings of what would be seen as a Christian ideological discussion about exorcism. It's actually, to me, striking a chord deep down inside that has to do with who am I, and what if I lost connection to that being that I believe that I am? What if I am something else? What if those that surround me are something else? It's terrifying, and something that I try not to think about too often.
Moving through some, again, not all, of subgenres of horror, we touch upon the Gothic subgenre, which are discussions of morality philosophy, religion, where the evil is most often acting as metaphors for some sort of human temptation that the hero must overcome. And it makes the human condition feel small in comparison to some unattainable morality. Here we're looking at Rebecca from Hitchcock in 1940. And moving to another subgenre, paranormal, involves supernatural events existing outside the context of scientific explanation. Here's a slide from The Conjuring. And again, with The Exorcist. This was the first film that really just scared the shit out of me. I shouldn't have been looking at that. John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, and
I would say paranormal. Like a lot of these subgenres, they blend. Like some of the best horror creators are, they have their fingers in every single one of these subgenres and more. But the paranormal, it's really interesting because it talks about things that lie outside of the human understanding, and there's some great games that fall within that as well. The one, probably my favorite, is Silent Hill in that series. The way that the family is and the people that go to that place are caught kind of in a space outside of time that's unable to be explained with any sort of reasoning, surrounded in terror and fog, and these beings that are there, like Pyramid Head here, which was, for me, as a gamer, one of the most terrifying encounters I've ever had in a game. And so I always love talking about Pyramid Head. Mm-hmm. And then within the same kind of universe is a game or a short demo even that was released called PT that was like extremely effective. If you have a chance to ever experience that or to even just watch a playthrough of it, it's very extremely minimal. It does take place, I would say, within the universe of Silent Hill, but it also entraps you into an experience that someone else has had that has lost their mind, and you start to question whether or not you're involved with that, and how exactly you could escape this never-ending nightmare within PT. And so that game has become kind of a legend because it wasn't ever like fully released to the public. It was something that was meant to lead to a new Silent Hill game, but I think it's a great reference, and if you get a chance to check it out, definitely do it. And then, moving into supernatural, talking about...
These are often teenagers or children who have inexplicable powers that they can't understand or control. Poltergeist, Children of the Corn, The Omen. There's something wrong with the children.
That's a new one.
And cosmic horror.
Yeah, cosmic horror is probably, it definitely holds a special place in both Robin and I's heart. It's the place where instead of imagining that there is a wonderful opportunity for humanity after this life, it kind of takes an honest questioning of what lies beyond our understanding. It approaches us with almost a nihilistic kind of lack of care for humanity. Does existence recognize us at all? Does it care about us? Does it have these kind of human aspects of emotion that we kind of attach to everything in our existence? Or are we just part of a cycle that is going to be ongoing for forever that we can't comprehend? we'll all hopefully find out more about that in the future. But it's a constant question as we walk around here on Earth. And there's some great examples of cosmic horror. I think this is looking at the Thing here, which I love how it doesn't quite explain the origins or the backstory of the terrors that are found there. Examples like the Lighthouse, which is more recent, if you haven't seen that. I think that's an example of, it's definitely a blend of subgenres, but it's extremely powerful and otherworldly once you get deep into it. And also Annihilation is a film that came out, was 2017 or I believe something like that, that really kind of questions where human evolution is leading, and what it means to be human, and what it would mean if a being from outside of our kind of understanding of existence started to try to comprehend us, and try to lure us into its web.
Mm-hmm. Films of the occult deal with mysticism and magic that has been suppressed, repressed, or is traditionally denied or habitually ignored.
And I would say each of us, for some reason, quite often has an encounter where we consider, religion. It ties back to a lot of the things we've been talking about in terms of the reason behind our existence. Also, the community that lies there within groups that are actively trying to seek knowledge together, and the way that can lead to a really dark place as well, where there's examples throughout history of that. And so the occult can be a great kind of well to dive into, to go to a place that I think is very close to a lot of us. There's a lot of great examples of that, like True Detective, for example, and also that even leads back to much more ancient stories, and even in the 1800s, The King in Yellow, coming from Robert Chambers, that I think inspired a lot of modern horror, comes from earlier occult kind of knowledge and studying and symbology that was applied to a story that was really relatable to people at the time, and questions the darkness that may lie beyond occult experiences.
Mm-hmm. Here we are at SciFi Horror. Combines terror of the unknown with science, as in Event Horizon, Alien, and games like Alien Isolation.
Yeah, there's some great sci-fi horror games. If you haven't had a chance to get your hands on those, one of my favorite ones, Robin just mentioned, Alien Isolation. If you've seen the Alien films, it kind of definitely immerses you into the experience that you're imagining while watching those films. There's also some other great examples of sci-fi horror, like Soma, for example. And Soma is, I really love because it focuses in on a really mysterious kind of journey that you get to take yourself as you learn about this place that I'm not going to spoil for you, but where you encounter machines that have a lot of human characteristics. And so this game causes me to question, what is human consciousness? How should we value humanity? How should we value machines that have elements that we might perceive as human? This is a question that is constantly being discussed now with kind of the up and coming movements with technology and AI especially, and the ethics surrounding that. And so I would say that Soma is a great example. Dead Space really kind of takes us beyond the known reaches of space into a place where unfathomable creatures and horrors exist. And they do a great job of building up an extremely tense and immersive and revealing horror experience in space. And then going back all the way to text-based games, text-based adventures, like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is a great example of breaking the fourth wall a little bit, because it's about characters that are trapped within a simulation and inside of a computer as you're sitting there typing and communicating with this device. And so I kind of love the tactile experience that still haunts me, both the story that's from as well as the game itself.
So we've overbuilt a bit. I think we're gonna throw our head out the window for just a second. So we're gonna move through quickly through body horror, which are grotesque violations of the human body. You see Hellraiser, Videodrome. We can land at Scorn.
Yeah, Scorn's also a recent game that just came out. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I would say that body horror itself was very difficult to do in games outside of in your imagination through sound or through something you might have heard characters talk about in games. But now visually, this game to me raised the bar in terms of this organic place that you're connected to and somehow are part of, and somehow is part of you. And the way that you progress through the game is by connecting yourself further into this kind of maddening space of body horror.
Mm-hmm. And speak of maddening, the madness kind of space in horror is often focused less on the killing and more on the force that drives the character to kill, which we experience in Jacob's Ladder, of course, The Shining, In the Mouth of Madness from John Carpenter, and
this is where we question why people who maybe are like us, or who we see as friends, or who we see just as people who live in the same kind of scenarios as us, why would they make the types of decisions that they make in certain scenarios? Could I end up in a scenario where I would also do something that terrifying and that terrible, the thing that I've always told myself that I would never do because I'm part of this group of the human race? But this is Spec Ops: The Line, where we follow a group of soldiers into the heart of darkness, and there's a cognitive dissonance that starts to rise up between what you're doing in the game and what you believe, and it questions you kind of to your very core about the ethics of war, but then also about humanity and existence in general.
And I think we should downhill these.
Yeah. Other cool games here to check out.
Eternal Darkness, Alan Wake. We move into the beloved slasher genre, where we get to know Michael Myers and the Halloween franchise, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course, Friday the 13th. And games like Until Dawn.
Yeah, I think this is probably the zone of horror that's been the most expressed in games. It's really visceral. It's something that is really identifiable as a threat that's coming for you that you can hardly imagine. Slasher enemies or villains typically don't show their faces. They really stay hidden. But some of the games that do it really well, like Robin was mentioned, Until Dawn and Outlast, and then Dead by Daylight also even has like a multiplayer experience of this survival and slasher horror with various slasher kind of villains.
Moving through an invasion genre, where the protagonist or loved ones are trapped inside or seeking to escape their home, as in The Purge. This is The Purge. There's, of course, the zombie genre, where populations are terrorized by the dead. In 1968, we had The Night of the Living Dead.
And I think this is a kind of ancient question, is like, what if someone came back from the dead? It leaves a lot of other questions on the table as well, like where did they go? What happened to all the people when they died? How would they behave when they come back? Do they have their humanity? There's lots of games that have really exploited the zombie zone. Obviously, there's good ones, and there's some that are, just kind of copying off of things that have been popular before. But The Last of Us, I would mention. Obviously, it's extremely strong as a game, and now people that are not even into games are experiencing that world, and that's really exciting, especially for horror film and game fans. Mm-hmm. And jumping here into found footage, this is a place that's really interesting to me because it has such limitations. It's usually a very kind of it's a group of people that decided to tell a story with the least amount of resources typically, but they can be extremely powerful. I remember when Blair Witch came out, and literally I had friends believing that this was an actual film that was found, and contemplating what the ending meant, and it seemed like those films would have kind of gone by the wayside, but there continues to be examples of found footage subgenre that are extremely powerful. And then from there, one thing that Robin and I are always keeping our eye on is Japanese style horror. It's something that I've had the chance to work on a little bit with this game and this franchise, Fear. Something I'd love to see more in games, especially the way that Japanese mythology deals with the ancestors and ghosts and forbidden places where they were taken, and just the way that what Robin will tell you a little bit about movement and human nature is portrayed.
Yeah, we've deeply influenced and inspired with our character and more specifically motion capture sessions with Buto, which is a Japanese dance theater known as the Dance of Darkness. And it depicts dancers in crude physical gestures, playful, grotesque imagery. It was a direct assault of the refinement and understated aesthetics of the Japanese culture in the 50s and 60s. And surreal choreographic language assists the dancer in the transmutation of the human body and transforming them into other states of being.
And it's terrifying to watch because the dancers themselves seem like they are not part of your reality. They're experiencing something entirely different, and there's something within them that's rending them, and they're trying to tear from themselves, or that's trying to tear itself from them. It's something that I think each of us would interpret a different way, but it's terrifying every single time, and even the movements seem unreal, the way that they bend and looks like they crack and break their bones as they move and twist and contort. And that moves us into the area that Robin and I are probably the very most excited about, which you could call it a lot of different things because it's a blend of different genres, but the art house horror genre that's become, I would say, more and more of a known entity over the last 10 years. There's a lot of really exciting things happening that don't just kind of take the tropes of some of the subgenres that we've been talking about, but really push the boundaries beyond what was expected. Vibrant experiences, ones that are driven by sound, ones that include otherworldly aspects and psychedelic aspects that push the visuals even further. I just feel this kind of a lot of horror creators were definitely in a certain lane, and now it feels like that is turned into a space where a lot of experimentation can take place. And so that's where we like to find ourselves at our studio, Eyes Out, and in what we're developing. And it's really, I would say, there's a few directors that come to mind right away, like Panos Cosmatos. We're seeing some of his work here in Beyond the Black Rainbow. Also in Mandy, where he worked with Nick Cage. And here working with Guillermo del Toro on Cabinet of Curiosities. This is an episode called The Viewing that Panos directed. All of them, I would say, have a thread of both pushing the boundaries of expected horror, but at the same time, this kind of familiarity with things of our childhood and an extreme expression of what I would call like the 1980s human culture, essentially, but at the same time causing you to question reality in a really interesting way. This is a game that I developed at my previous studio, Tangent Games, called Here They Lie, which is a dark, surreal, noir horror experience. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it was available for PSVR and also for the PlayStation. But it goes deep into the mind of an ancient being and leaves the physical world. And so really had a blast developing that and also creating the soundtrack for that.
And so we've landed here at the question, why choose horror? And I'm offering that to the room because I think it's an excellent question, and not necessarily because I'm so sure of the answer. And, I don't wish a home invasion or a chainsaw duel upon my reality. So for me, when I spelunk into it and I go back to the beginning and take a look around, and I find it may have something to do with this. This record opens with heavy rain, a funeral bell, the crack of thunder, and the most evil of all intervals, the flatted fifth. It's Black Sabbath's debut album, released 1 year before I was, in 1970. And I stared at this record for forever when I was a kid. It was a daily practice. And I'd listen at all volumes on particle board speakers that were buzzing unglued and banged together after every listen. Turn the record over, carefully drop the needle, and then back to staring at this sleeve for another 20 minutes. And then tracing the sleeve. And then, who is she? And why am I afraid of her? Is she in trouble? Am I in trouble? I was 6 and 7 and 8, and I was captivated by some alternate, very adult-sounding story, different than the one I was living in Miss Mayola's class, learning about state birds and pennies and nickels and dimes. And it really, it only grew stronger and louder. And for a time, this is how I would soar. It was a solo endeavor for me at the time. I was just tethered to the altar of the turntable, and I would just spin out, man, and wonder about it all. And these records turned to tapes and to CDs, and they'd scratch and squeak and skip round every season for more than a decade. It was more than half my entire existence, and almost all of my remembering life. And I should add that while many people, most people I know have had a similar experience or connection with maybe this sort of crowd, I didn't know any of them then. And I was a kid alone in his room with his records, and he belonged to the records, and the records really belonged to him. And this was not something that I kind of brought to the soccer field. It was very, I don't know, became personalized that way. I'm going to steer this back to horror. But the day came when I had wheels, and I would soon go to where the music was living on stages. And I was all grown up now. And I'd moved on from the fantasy indulgence of demons and nightmare spectacle through the eyes of a lonely kid wondering about the world. I'd moved on to greener pastures. I'm just kidding. I doubled down on doom and havoc. And this time it was personal. These were my demigods, and the choice could not have been more clear to me at the time. And so persists the lineage of this dark, harrowing round table of character, personality. I didn't leave it, and so the story went with me. And later, when I did start to meet people who had a shared interest here, it was like meeting long-lost family that I never knew I had. The connection ran deep and the quickest, and it was more reliable than other connections. And so, given the option, in 1987, which of these two fools am I trying to hang with? And which do I want to know more about? And how did they do this? And why? And who are these people? And what came before this? And what now? And can I get this on a shirt? And I want to draw this. And I'm just like that. And so is he. When we were first started to jam together back and forth with decks daily of reference images and touchstones sort of stuff, art and character, environments and things. One of 100 images in a day that happened to be a still from Beyond the Black Rainbow. And in that moment, Cory was like, here's the keys to my house, let yourself in, beer's in the fridge, help yourself. And this is my story so far, and this is the memory of who I am continuing to be.
And it really, each of us probably has a personal reason why we'd come to a meetup like this to discuss this sort of topic. And for me, definitely, it was something that from the very early moments in my life, I started to question reality. And this is because I actually grew up, some of you are probably really familiar, as a member of the Latter-day Saint Church. And so at a young age, I was kind of fed a lot of the answers that I was looking for. And I was kind of embraced by a group of people who kind of reinforced the belief that they had. And they had a strong belief. And it all felt interesting to me, but I kept wondering why certain things were the way that they were. And I remember my parents and my grandparents saying, "Why do you always say why? That's your favorite word. Quit saying that word." And it was because certain things to me didn't make sense, but it all kind of accelerated because the discussion that is within this this religion has to do with a lot of religions, same thing having to do with, you know, where we came from, why we're here, how we should behave while we're here on earth, and where we go after we die, and what it means, if there is some meaning there. And my older brother passed away when I was really young, and so at that moment, I had to start asking these questions for real. It wasn't just something that, oh, someday down the road, this will all make sense to me. So I'll follow this path. I had to push the boundaries of that path and see where it led me. I had to ask those questions harder, and I felt like there was an oversimplification. That was my interpretation of the existence that we were all walking around in. I had to find out if my brother was where he said he was, or where they said he was, and it led me on a path where I realized that there's so much more to learn. There's so much outside of what's been defined that I think it's a calling for each of us that horror kind of hands out to us to say, keep questioning reality. Keep questioning your own belief of who you are. Keep questioning the reasons why you make decisions the way you do in your life. Keep questioning whether or not any of this means anything, or are we part of something that we can't comprehend at this moment. That was the thing that really stuck with me and eventually led me to some of these references that we've been talking about here today, where I felt like, oh, there's someone who's making a statement about some of these same questions, but isn't afraid to try something new or to question it in a way that might be offensive to previous kind of approaches to this. And it's not my goal to tell people what they ought to believe, but at the same time, I think we naturally, as humans, when we tap into it, we have this desire to find out those exact questions. And I think that that's what drives us to become greater as people. And that's what's really driven me to want to be here, not just at Tree Fort, but here on Earth in general, is because we're like astronauts. We have this opportunity to test and to try and find something that, you know, our ancestors could never have possibly grasped, but maybe because of their attempts, we start to learn more. And even the things that aren't necessarily pursuing a certain truth, they're pursuing maybe a really unique perspective that could lead you to truth. And just the ability to, instead of hold back, but to dive in further to those uncomfortable places, those uncomfortable questions, the darkness that resides, you know, in every closet and around every corner, and then way out in the cosmos. And so that's what brought me into this whole discussion of horror, and it seems to be a quest that the two of us will be on for a long time, and we really love it.
Yeah. So this is the well from which we draw, and thank you for your indulgence. And that's a wrap.
Robin, Cory, thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. That was so amazing.
Thank you.